Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Didn't Turn Out Okay with myself, Jenny Moness. And today we have Neeti Narula, a yoga and meditation teacher and mom of two, Rooni, who's 2, and Lokan, who's 5. And today we're talking about highly emotional things within our kids, but also that tend to be tough for us, even as grown-ups. So, Neeti, we talked a little bit prior, and I guess we can dive in.
So Lokan is 5. He just started kindergarten. And the thing that I personally find myself struggling with is he's always been slow to warm up. And we've done, we do a lot of work around that. But my personal expectations, I feel them shifting as he's getting older. Like it just feels different. And I feel a lot of guilt around that because he just seems so much bigger because he can articulate so much more. And I see him play with his friends and I see how he's become so much more outgoing in the past year. So then I have this sort of expectation that, it's going to be okay at drop off. Like I expect him to kind of just walk right in like the other kids, like his friends are doing. And, it's hard to then see him have those same big emotions at the last minute, crying and clinging on. And it's like, I honestly just have felt so bad every day walking away from the situation because I'm like annoyed that it's still happening. And I'm like mad at myself for that. So there's like this added layer of like me being mad at myself because he's still in this process, and I'm like, why do I have these expectations? Like what's shifted in the past year that my expectations are now so much higher?
Do you think when you said it's because he's changed and has seemed more comfortable and outgoing in some social settings that you expected that to kind of be this like global shift in every setting for him?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think as he's sort of gotten a little sassier too, like,
it feels like he should be like more like confident and ready.
Yeah.
Do you also think it's like this kindergarten aspect that's how I felt last year when Tess started, like sort of like, are we really still having this like clingy hard time in the back? I obviously didn't say that, but sort of, but then I'd be like, kindergarten's such a huge,
so different
step, especially if they haven't gone to pre-K at that same program and it's an entirely new school, often bigger settings and not as intimate as maybe they were prior. But in terms of where we come into play with it, for me, that was kind of the roadblock, sort of like, I wanted to set you up in these early years to kind of now fly and like hold your head up high. For you, do you feel like it's anything within yourself that, like, do you see anything from when you were younger that kind of plays a part?
I was exactly the same way. And so that's where I think a huge part of my parenting experience has been really reconnecting with my own childhood self. Because I think a lot of times when we're reacting harshly, like there's a part of us that's reacting at ourselves, and the way we used to be. And we want, not to generalize, but we want our kids to, like, we almost want to self-correct or like do better, for them than we did for ourselves, or, whatever the thoughts are around that. But
almost like I wish that I was different when I was your age, or like that I don't, or also like you want to protect them from going through the hardships that maybe came along with like that stuff.
Absolutely. And like with Lokan right now, yes, kindergarten is a huge shift. And he said to me so many times that he was nervous about it. It's at the same school, but, there's things I can even just tell from like the way the teacher handles the kids. It's different. It's not like this coddly, like, we're taking care of you. It's like, it's like students be quiet and, they have to find the bathroom on their own, which he hasn't gone to the bathroom once since school started because he's scared he's going to get lost in the hall, even though he has a buddy. Like, literally comes home so uncomfortable every day. But, I think I see so much of myself. I had trouble separating. I also didn't do a lot of after-school activities because I really wanted to be at home. And my parents, didn't push me on that front. And also, I'm first generation. My parents grew up in India, and it just culturally wasn't like, I just felt really different. And because I didn't do like the soccer after school and all those things. And so for him, like he doesn't want to do those things. And right now with our back to school transition, I'm trying to like get him to the art class after school, the soccer, the swim, and give him that experience that I didn't have that made me feel so different. But he's like really not wanting to do it. So I'm like, ugh, where's the balance of like, how much do I push on? And then how much do I just like, let him be 5, you know?
Man, there's like so much in there. I feel no, I don't even mean like so much like baggage. I mean so much in there that I think is like so helpful even for me to hear, and I'm sure people listening. Do you feel like you missed out? Even though your parents were, of course, within their culture, like felt it wasn't maybe such a priority, but it sounded like they were like honoring who you were temperamentally by not pushing you.
Yeah, I think I do. And I don't know if it's just like, who knows how I would have, if I would have turned out differently, like if I went to after school. Like I did Girl Scouts and a couple things, but not like, I felt like the people around me were doing more.
But at the time you felt like, oh, I want to do that? Or maybe looking back, it felt like, I wish I had done that?
I think I was so shy when I was little.
Oh, me too. Like
so shy.
Paralyzing.
Yeah. And so I think it would have been, I guess I feel like if I'd done it, maybe would have been more outgoing early on.
Or
but
like
I don't know.
I don't know
if that's, I don't know if that's really the way it works.
But just something to even like start reflecting on a little bit. Not that we should parent based on like our own childhood, but like what is behind our, kind of roadblocks or why we're so, fixated on certain things, I think is helpful to kind of let go of certain things or not let go of certain things. It's hard to know also where kids are like, I don't like that activity, more because they don't want to separate and less about the actual activity. Dance was such a huge part of my childhood, or gymnastics, and not that has to be theirs, but maybe I just think it's important for them to kind of find those not school things.
Exactly. Because it's also, and this is where it goes back to my childhood, finding those things gives you a sense of community and a sense of belonging, right? So in a dance class, they're with it's, different people than they're in their classroom with. It's a different environment. And you just learn to feel that feeling of belonging and community from a young age. And I think that's what I wish I had in my childhood that I didn't. And that's what's behind it. Wow, this is like therapy.
That's so great to like be able to know though. Yeah, like it's less about the actual activity and more about just having other, kind of like social
outlets
clubs. And then the other thing that you were talking about that I think is so what I'm deep in is the teachers' shifts as our kids get older, meaning like, the 2-year-old teacher and how different the kindergarten teacher might feel.
Yeah.
And also along the way, there's different temperaments of teachers. But I was just talking about this with Nell that every day we're like good up until the teachers are kind of like shooing us out and shooing her in. And I say shooing not in like they're being disrespectful, but it's very different from, Mommy, can I have 3 more kisses and 3 more hugs? And the teacher allowing us to do that. They would now, when I said that in the Meet the Teacher, they're like, okay, do that outside. Not, we're not going to let you do that anymore. And it's like, I'm also dealing with like the separation. So as soon as they're like, come on, Nellie, and like taking her arm and bring her in the elevator, that's when she looks at me and we kind of are like speaking without words, like this feels so different for both of us. And like, we don't feel good.
Yeah.
And I was saying to the other moms there, like, that's like the antithesis of like what I would want. And they're like, Jenny, it's good for her. And it's so true. Like, it's part of what they're learning.
Yeah. It's a big part of, they're growing up.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, I'm having a lot of the same, he just has to like walk himself into the front doors of school. He won't go some days, but it's gotten a lot better. And I think for me, just like to see him, it's symbolic, to like walk himself in as opposed to me like taking him in. Like he really is older and bigger. And I think with that comes this, like a little tear shed when I walk away, which is like, my baby's growing up.
100%.
But I think I've come so far from where I started with our goodbyes because I think I was really, really gentle in our approach. And part of me has realized, like, I think I have to be a little bit firmer in some aspects of the way I parent. And it's a weird feeling.
Like
because,
not boundary way, but like sort of real world preparation way.
Yeah. Like, we have to get there on time. He gets marked late otherwise, like,
Oh my
and
God,
and I want, like last year, pre-K, I tried my best to get him there on time, but I didn't want to create that rush
Oh my God,
chaos in the morning. Like, I'd rather have him have a nice experience. Like, we would do, like, on the walk to school, stop and look at leaves or, like, feel the sun on our face, because those moments, I think, are so, like, I hope that that's what, when he looks back, he'll, like, remember, like, those
100%.
little things.
I actually think about people like you and like how do people who like value meditation and slowing down deal with the morning like
rush.
pull of needing to rush. So it's changed a lot. Like, can you stop and look at leaves?
We don't stop and look at leaves because I always used to tell him, like, there's always time. I mean, I still do. I tell him there's always time to stop and take a breath, and just feel where you are. And I think that is so foundationally important to me. So I will be late for, like, that breath or that cuddle, but I'm really trying. We have perfect timeliness so far. Because in my head, I also want to make him realize, like, the way the world works, you can't show up late every day, which we were kind of doing. And so, like, I have this huge shift to, like, I'm taking responsibility to make him understand he can get there on time. He can still take that breath, but he's got to be on time. And it feels so much firmer, but I feel good about it. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm just a firmer. We're getting there on time. But my mornings are suffering.
But this is a really big theme, I think, in general. It's like we parent respectfully and, I used to say, like, 2 years ago, I'm perpetually late 10 minutes because I'm, like, honoring my kids' speed and temperaments and emotions and sometimes meltdowns. But then it's like, when do we kind of, like, not draw the line? Because you don't want to be like, okay, now you're 4, we're not going to do that anymore. But how we can kind of ease into that. But I think there's times where it's okay, where it's actually like a sign of love, right? And respect to say, I know you really don't want to rush right now. We have to because class is going to start and we have to be on time. That's setting a boundary and, acknowledging that, like, this might not feel great right now, but we have to.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, just rushing for rushing's sake, which is just another thing that I think often people think they always have to do.
Yeah. Well, I had this, like, epiphany a few years ago that, like, no matter what, I've just always been a person who runs late. And maybe this is also a thing of me trying to, like, correct. But I've always been somebody who runs late. And to the point where it's like my autopilot is rush.
Me too.
And I'm trying to be like, wait, do I have to rush? Like, do I actually have to rush? What am I rushing? Like, why am I rushing? What made me get in this, like, headspace this morning? But
was this the first morning of the buffer?
This morning I just had this buffer because drop off is so early now and then coming here, I was like, I could go. So I got ready and then came here and knowing I'd have a lot of time, but I brought a book and I was like, I'm going to give myself time to just read. And that's something I'm trying to work on, like, a lot more. Just, I think now I'm going to get a little off topic, but the way that our world has changed with, like, technology and they're just being constantly, like, online or, like, in touch with work, in touch with school, in touch with everything all the time. Like, our buffer time is precious. And it's like, we don't have the same kind of unwind time. And I think we feel like our kids probably feel that too. Like, if you think about how we were raised versus them. But going back to the point on, like, setting the boundary, like, when do we sort of, like, draw the line and say, like, okay, we got to get there on time. Something that I've been working on with Lokan is, like, making sure he understands what happens, like, if we're late.
Like
you
the
know?
natural
So
consequence
yeah,
of it,
like
right.
if we're late, like he doesn't meet with his class in the cafeteria, he'll have to go, like, I'm not
Right.
trying to scare him. I'm just
No, but
telling
it
him the
sets the
reality.
expectation
Like,
for him too.
yeah, he's not going to walk to his classroom with his teacher in the class. Like, he will be alone, like, with, I don't know, one of the
Right.
supervisors.
But you're
walking
not
in.
like you're going to be in a lone
Yeah,
dark
I'm not
room
like-
if we're late.
I'm
But
not
yeah.
like, yes, I'm not like telling, like,
But the
scaring
reality
him.
of
But
what
I'm like,
happens.
yeah. So I want him to be prepared because that is going to happen probably like next week. Like, you know, like we will be late eventually.
Right.
It'll happen. But I just want him to know that so he feels like ownership and pride about getting there early. Like, you know,
Totally.
like maybe that's empowering for him.
It is. I think, yeah, our school, you can have like breakfast at school if you're there at a certain time or
Yeah.
you miss it. And
Yeah.
that was like a big theme last year with being on time. And this year, Tess will say, do we have time for breakfast? Even if she's like eating at home, I think for her, it's a sign like we're on the right track with time. I do also think it's great to set that expectation of that there's natural consequences. And it's why I always say, for people who are talking about like punishments and things like that, like there's natural consequences.
Right.
We don't need to implement them. We don't need to say if we're late, there's no TV. If they're late,
Yeah.
they have some sort of shift that
Yeah.
isn't necessarily so ideal. That I think we can like lean into that. But so I think that's great for also like letting him know what happens.
Yeah. But also going back to what we were just talking about with buffer, I think it's the same thing as with ourselves.
Oh,
like
yeah.
we're constantly rushing. The drop off is smoother when it's not rushed, when we have those moments. And then me getting here and like having a few minutes, like I just feel better overall. So maybe we're just teaching our kids to feel better by like
Absolutely.
empowering them to get there on time.
And as
you know?
you're saying this, I wonder if that's why it bothers me so much with like the rushed goodbye, that it's sort of like I worked so hard to like
Yeah.
I'm here 10 minutes early with my daughter, and then like why does the goodbye have to be rushed?
Yeah.
It can be let's do a quick goodbye so everyone knows that mommy comes back
Yeah.
and you know we can get started with our day, rather than I think it's sort of like such a
defeating the
drastic shift in
purpose.
energy, you
Yeah.
know? So I've realized I think that's why it's like triggering for me when they do that. It's like, wait, what just happened? You know?
Because in most cases they have to probably do that, but you know,
No,
for
and
there
I
to
get
be a
it. The
confident-
elevator isn't staying open for like 3 more
Yeah.
kisses and hugs.
But yeah, that makes
But
sense.
I just think I just realized why that also like, you know, bothers me too.
Yeah, it makes sense.
We've talked about, or that we wanted to bring up today, kind of tough topics that happen, you know. I mean, they could happen younger too, just naturally in life. Things happen. We can't choose what age they happen when we're parenting. My grandmother just passed 2 weeks ago, and I, you know, in thinking about that, I never, even if they were young, would have tried to hide that something was happening. I might
Right.
not have said it in the same way. I think there's age appropriate ways, but yeah, I think we talked, and we can get into this now,
Yeah.
but just like how this feels relevant for you if you're comfortable
Yeah.
talking about it.
It's exactly what I've always wanted to like talk to somebody about. And now I think I'm kind of like, I'm worried I'm too late. But, you know, I have a lot of loss in my past, and I just want to like state it objectively. You know, like I lost my dad when I was 8 and my brother when I was 23. So in my family, it's just me and my mom. And Lokan's old enough that now he's kind of like, he sometimes asks me like, why don't you have a dad? You know, and
I just want to say you're not too late. So
Okay.
speak confidently about whatever journey you've taken with it.
And he, like, there's pictures of my brother around, you know, my mom's house and even in my bedroom and stuff. And I've like skirted around the issue because for me, him finding out, like, it's one thing for him to understand that people get older and die.
Right. Absolutely.
And he's seen, like, he's understood that. But for him to know that, like, a parent could die, you know, in a few, like, you know,
it's, like,
or,
huge, yeah.
you know, or like that a sibling could die, I can tell that hasn't really like clicked for him. And
have you ever brought that, not brought that up? So meaning like you think it wouldn't click, or like you don't want to go there, or like you.
I haven't gone there.
Right.
And I think I'm ready to. I'm just worried, you know, they handle things so much better than, like, he handles these difficult things better than I think. So I think a lot of this is obviously about me and what I'm trying to protect him from.
Totally.
But yeah, I guess I just don't know how to broach the subject and how to even for him
And then like
me.
One of my best friends in the world lost her sister, and similar to you, she's like, it's one thing for him to think, that people die when they're older or if they're sick or something, but I just didn't want him to feel scared. And another thing that was huge for her is she didn't want him to feel so impacted by like the pain that she probably had to endure losing her sibling, like that would have felt rough for him. Anyway, like, after when she did finally tell him, she was like, he kind of knew. So I just want to like plant that. Like, she's like,
Ooh, I just got goosebumps.
I know. Not that she was like, I regret not telling him. I know that's like emotional to think about, but just like our kids, they're so like attuned.
Yeah.
And not that he like will know exactly like the heaviness of it. I know that is so heavy, but just sort of like there's a presence in your life in pictures, and like I'm going to get emotional. Like our kids are so connected to us.
Yeah.
He might understand that there was some like thing with this person that's in pictures. And what are your thoughts on like how you think has he ever asked about someone in those pictures? Has he asked if you have brothers or sisters?
Yeah, it's definitely come up. And he's definitely just pointed and asked about the person. And I've just like I've skirted it off, like been like, oh, that's a family member, like I don't.
Which is why like he might understand.
And so when you just said that, I really feel that I think he knows. Like I don't think he knows that he knows,
right?
But I think he has like an inner knowing.
Absolutely, that's
I think, because Lokan and I are like extremely connected to a point where it's like it's eerie. It's one of those things of parenting. Like I never even could fathom that you could be connected to a person this way. Like I see his facial expressions and I feel the emotion in my body. Like I can feel like I remember, and maybe it's a remembering. I don't know, but. So, yeah, I think.
Meaning you might have felt that way as a kid with, like, your parents?
Yeah, like, I could just, like, feel, like, in, like, some certain moments where he's uncomfortable. Like, and maybe that's part of what I'm trying to fix. I don't know. But I think when I do broach the subject, I feel like it will be probably the next time he, like, asks me. Because I don't want to, like, sit him down and make it a thing, right? So, like, the next time, like, something comes up, I feel like I could just say it. And kids are so, like I feel like he'd be like, oh.
I think it's a journey and process of delivering news like that, and also readiness, which is why I wanted to stop you before and say it's not too late. And, like, there's so many times while you're talking now, I want to be like, and that's okay that you haven't told him and that you skirted. It has to be when you're ready. I found out that my sister had breast cancer. She's doing so well now. And I waited till I was ready to tell the girls, Aunt Lindsay's sick, she might look different, things like that I knew. I waited till like it would be something that had to kind of be said.
Right.
Because I couldn't even, accept it. And so I think it's readiness for both you and him and then Rooney. But I do think that we make things feel like that they're going to be such kind of like traumatic conversations for our kids. And they're so beyond strong and resilient and,
I think it's in our heads as traumatic conversations on our side.
Oh, because we also,
it's our trauma. I think
100%.
And anytime I've had a situation like this with my son so far, it's like once it kind of happens, I mean, I haven't had this obviously I can't have this exact situation with him, but I'll share an example in a second. It's like lighter once it happens because you're like, oh, it was all about me,
Right. Or it can be like out in the open too. I think like after you do tell him and then he goes, oh, it's healing, I
It
think.
is. Yeah.
Oh, who is this him? And, and then you can like tell a story. It can become sort of this like way of, healing and keeping his presence.
Absolutely.
But what was the story that
so my husband, Andrew's grandfather passed away a couple months ago, and Lokan's visited him a couple times, and Lokan was asking something about Big Papu because there was some like Greek cookie that came up. It's the whole thing. And my husband just like mentioned, or Lokan asked about Big Papu, and Andrew just said like, oh, he passed away. And Lokan's response was like, oh, well, it's so good we visited him then, And that was just like, like, it's crazy that he was that, like, that was his response at 5 to be like, it's so good that we visited him. Like, I still don't know how, like, that showed me how much more of a deeper understanding of what's going on in our lives that he has,
and just such an amazing way to process, right?
Yeah.
To focus on the
like that we saw, to focus on the positive. And it made me really pause and be like, oh, he understands what death is. Like he knows,
right. And just, I think we also think, and inevitably it might come up, the questions that we'll get, like, well, how and what happens.
Yeah.
And all of that. And there's times recently, like, more about how babies are made that I'm like, I'm not sure right now. Like, let me think about, or I won't say I'm not sure. I'll say, let me think about that. And that's okay too. If it's like, how did how did he pass? And if it feels too heavy, it's okay to say, let me think about that, and to like kind of process. Like, I think there's so often this, I need to respond immediately, or it can feel scary. I think it feels scary when it's like, I don't want to tell you, or, when you're older, I think.
Wow, that's so helpful to just have that, let me think about it phrase.
In your pocket. Yeah. It's helpful for me. The questions that are coming up, not even relating to death, but just, wow.
Yeah. There's big questions at these little ages.
Right. There's times where I'm like, let me think about that. Or I just recently, or that like I need to kind of rephrase things. I recently talked about with my sister being, with being diagnosed, that I said to the girls that she's sick, and someone actually pointed out to me, don't say that because then they might get a cold and think that like that's going to happen to them. And it was like an important point to make. But now, like, how do I phrase it? You know what I mean? So if there's any element of it that's your roadblock, it's okay to not have to, like, say the entire story, when you're delivering that news.
Yeah, that's really helpful because I think, it unleashes so many questions.
Right, that you're like, I don't know how. Yeah, you kind of imagine, like, the 20 questions that will come after, and you're like, I can't even go there, so I'm just not going to even go there at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to say, I would love to talk to you about him, when I'm ready. Even that.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying if there's like a compelling time that you feel like you want to be able to. Oh.
I'm kidding.
No, I know. And
I'm getting emotional in like I feel like, oh God,
no,
this conversation is happening like for a reason at this time because I feel ready. And I think it will be a nice way to almost bring my brother back into my life a little bit more. Like,
Yeah.
So thank you.
I just like got the chills thinking about it, that's why I felt comfortable saying it. Because I feel like, when you lose someone, being able to like openly like have them back in a way, like that's like what I hold on to when I lose someone is like, I'm going to keep the like what Lokan said, like, I'm so grateful to have had that. And like to keep that is like, you might have like things within your family that you're like, oh, this, so I hope it feels like, maybe something helpful and meant to be
Yes,
with the
absolutely.
timing.
Yeah. I'm just kind of like blown away right now. God. Before we finish, I want to ask you about some childcare stuff because it's like really on my mind. I just feel like I don't have enough support to do all the things I want to do, not just from a work perspective, but also I'm struggling right now, and I've really only left my kids with our part-time nanny or my mother, and I'm looking for babysitters, and it's a hard thing to do. Especially if I'm just like, I'm looking for a couple hours here or there. So any advice on like vetting babysitters or like what to look for? Like I
Yeah.
obviously would want like a teacher to babysit, but
Totally. And first, I want to say that that's a really hard, part of parenting
Yeah.
is leaving our kids with someone else that, it's sort of a journey that a lot of people kind of evolve with. It's not like immediately, oh, I'm going to just like hire, a bunch of people. And so I feel like it's also, acknowledging that it sounds like you're ready to like open up your village, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that everything is teachable except for a love of kids. I've managed and hired so many teachers and daycare, staff and people for my own kids. And I always just look for who is really warm and loves being with kids because I feel like the rest is really teachable and different for each family, what you want to kind of prioritize. And so I think that's the biggest thing to look for, even if it's someone like when you're going out at night who, isn't going to spend so much time with your kids. I just think that there's a level of that makes you feel good being able to separate that whoever's there wants to be there. And it's like, the start of a new relationship for your child too. I think it's similar to what we were talking about before with like why, activities are helpful for our kids and getting them comfortable socially with, outside of school. And this is another part of that growth, getting them comfortable with other people besides us.
Yeah.
And that's a big step, but to me, it feels like a really important one as they get older, too. I think it doesn't get easier for them, to separate with new people.
Exactly.
What do you feel like is why kind of it feels like not a big thing for you, but I sense it makes you nervous, or why you feel like you've waited till now?
I just, I think I've kind of worked it all out quite nicely for a while where it's like, I could be flexible with my nanny hours and have her stay later for our date nights. But I feel like I don't have the ability to do anything like last minute or like if I wanted to do something tomorrow, like
It's like buffer stuff that you want to be able to
and
have.
It's just, I need a little bit more. And I think my kids are older now, like 5 and 2, they're still little, but it's not like we're out of that like really baby phase. Like, she can express herself a little bit. And so I feel more comfortable. I think also my daughter's school getting basically canceled is like putting this urgency on me. But I've kind of avoided it because I've been able to skirt by without needing to address it. But I also think I see my kids and they're both like, slow to warm up. And I think it could be good for them to now like get exposed to more people so they feel confident,
I was gonna
talking
say
to
that
people.
this will probably help with the, how you said, Logan, with like getting comfortable going to the bathroom at school or eating at school, all these things that we don't realize are like more intimate aspects of like doing outside of us.
Yeah.
And I think it helps when we kind of open up who takes care of them to get comfortable with all of those things. Yeah. And similar, like when I told you that my mom friends were like, Jenny, like it's good for her. I think it is good for our kids, even if at first, there's some crying or tears. Everyone's always like, how do you, get past that? Like, are your kids just fine when you're out? And I'm like, no, it's not always like that, and it might be the whole, like, I'm 10 minutes late. But I also know and am confident that this helps them. You know, it kind of builds that muscle of you're safe even without me. You can go to the bathroom without me. You can eat without me. And I feel safe with this person.
Yeah.
And conveying that to our kids helps them feel safe in their world, right? Like if we're, you know, not kind of trusting other people with them, how will they?
Exactly.
So I hope that like motivates you, even if it feels like very kind of like radical in the moment. Like, oh my God, there's someone that's not these 3 people that have always taken care of them to be with them. So I think it will also help with all of the other things that we talked about this whole episode.
And it's the same thing. Like I didn't have babysitters growing up, you know? And so it's kind of like the same, it goes back to the same theme. And it's like, I want to see them be confident, like asking for what they need from adults. And so, yes, it motivates me.
Yeah. And like being assertive. Like, I think it motivates them to be assertive, right? Like what you were saying, how you and Lokan are so connected. And when you have someone like that being with you all the time, you know, how we want them to be able to survive with like people who like they have to speak up, you know?
Yeah.
I recently talked so much about how I am prepping Tess for like speaking up, and I think it's an element of it that there maybe hasn't been like so many opportunities where she has to if I'm always like in tune and attuned throughout, like, and she feels so good about it now.
Oh, good.
Like, yeah. Or I asked, or Nellie, you know, who, you know, has a hard time like with going to the vet, things like that with new people, will be so proud like when she went and at school and asked for what she needed. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I've been using a lot of what you share for Tess. I use with Lokan because they seem very similar in their nature, and the practicing, you know, even sharing about the weekend and stuff like that has been really helpful. So
I'm
thank
glad.
you.
And I hope that in terms of like the heavier stuff we talked about, that it gives you a little bit of like motivation to know that, that they, you know, even when I've like talked about these heavier topics, you know, with someone like Tess, who I feel like, you know, kind of can connect dots already, that it's been kind of a growth for both of us, you know, in our relationship and independently. You know, she feels like good that it's something that like I've shared with her when she knows that it's like something so important and meaningful. So I hope you, I hope you'll update me.
I will. I also think I'm just thinking about it from as they grow up, you know, I want them to have a confident understanding of how our time on this planet works. You know, I think it'll just, it's important. So thank you.
And such an important growth part for us and them.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I need more of your like energy. So thank you for motivating me.
So helpful for me. I feel like I have homework to do, but like in a really good way. Like I feel so good.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening. Neeti, how can people find you to get more of like your tips on calm and all the things?
I share a lot on Instagram, and my handle is just at Neeti.Narula. And I'm also a creator at Melissa Wood Health, so you can practice with me and meditate with me there. And
thank you guys so much.
Thank you.